Dad and Rachel were bickering about her book club when I screamed from the living room. 15 minutes later, my spine was broken, and their guilt has been rotting ever since. It started so innocently. I was helping Rachel, my dad's new wife, hang fairy lights for her book club. I'd climbed up a ladder, stretching to loop the last strand over a hook. Then, without warning, the ladder shifted beneath me. In one sickening instant, gravity yanked me backward. I remember the flash of lights, my arms flailing helplessly, and then, impact. My body hit the hardwood floor with a crack so sharp it echoed through the house. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare blankly at the ceiling fan spinning above me. Then came the pain, white-hot, rippling through my spine like fire spreading through dry grass. My vision flickered, dark at the edges. Rachel rushed over, kneeling beside me. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I tried to answer, but all that came out was a wet gasp. I forced myself to sit up, big mistake. Something grated deep in my back, and I screamed. My legs, they felt wrong. Heavy, tingling, like they didn't belong to me. Rachel told me not to move and pulled out her phone. For a second, I thought she was calling an ambulance. But her thumbs were moving too fast, too quietly. She was texting. Dad came running from the garage, grease still on his hands. The second he saw me sprawled on the floor, his face drained of color. "What happened?" he demanded. "The ladder slipped," Rachel said quickly, before I could speak. Dad reached for his phone, but Rachel caught his wrist. "Wait," she said softly. "Let's just make sure she's really hurt before we panic. Ambulances are expensive, and people overreact about these things." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was lying there, unable to feel my legs, and she wanted to wait? Dad hesitated, torn between me and her. Rachel kept talking in that calm, convincing tone, about how her nephew once fell off a ladder and turned out fine, about how I probably just had the wind knocked out of me. Meanwhile, the tingling in my legs crept upward toward my hips. Panic clawed at my chest. "Something's wrong," I gasped. "Please, call for help." Dad finally started to dial, but Rachel pressed her hand over his phone. "Let's just get her to the couch first," she urged. "If she can walk, we'll know she's fine." And unbelievably, he agreed. Together, they tried to lift me. The pain that tore through my spine was so sharp, so violent, that I screamed until my throat burned, and somewhere outside, the neighbor's dog began barking in alarm. I collapsed back onto the floor, sobbing, begging them to call for help. But Rachel just kept talking, her voice calm, almost irritated, as if I were being dramatic. "Let's just wait a few minutes," she insisted. "The book club starts in less than an hour, and paramedics showing up would ruin everything I've planned." Her words barely registered at first. I was staring at the ceiling, gasping, fighting the dizziness clouding my vision. When I turned my head slightly, I saw Dad standing there, phone in hand, frozen. His eyes flicked between Rachel and me, calculating, weighing options as though this were a difficult decision and not the obvious emergency it was. That moment hurt more than the fall. The fact that he hesitated, that he didn't call 112 immediately, splintered something inside my chest that had nothing to do with broken bones. Rachel started suggesting alternatives, her tone practical, almost cheerful. "Why don't we drive her to urgent care instead? It's cheaper, faster, and it won't ruin the evening." She was already scrolling on her phone, searching directions, while I lay there trying to make her understand I couldn't move. Dad nodded like it was a reasonable plan, already talking about how to get me into the car. He didn't seem to remember what every high school health class teaches, that moving someone with a spinal injury could cause permanent paralysis. But I remembered. And I was terrified. My vision was dimming at the edges now. The tingling in my legs had spread up to my chest, each breath growing shallower. Panic was clawing at me, and they were still arguing logistics. Rachel glanced at her watch and said briskly, "If we're going to take her, we need to go now. I have to be back before my guests arrive." The casual way she said it, like my possible paralysis was just an inconvenient delay, made something inside me go cold. In that instant, I realized Dad had married someone who didn't care whether I lived or died. "I need an ambulance," I gasped again. "Please, you can't move me." But Dad had already decided. He went to pull the car around while Rachel hovered over me, still muttering about how urgent care had x-rays, how it would all be fine. I was crying openly now, begging them to stop, to wait for professionals. They didn't listen. Rachel grabbed my arms. Dad took my legs. And the second they lifted me, agony ripped through my body like lightning. My vision exploded into white. The world tilted, and then disappeared. When my vision finally cleared, I realized I was being carried, dragged, really, through the garage. Every step sent knives of pain shooting up my spine. I wanted to scream for them to stop, but my voice came out in broken sobs. They managed to wedge me into the back seat of Dad's SUV. I was shaking, drenched in sweat, begging them to call an ambulance. Dad started the engine, and Rachel climbed into the passenger seat, her tone brisk and businesslike as she pulled up directions to the urgent care center on her phone. The car jolted over the first bump in the road, and I screamed so loud it startled Dad. Every tiny motion felt like someone was twisting a knife deep in my back. My legs had gone from tingling to completely numb, and panic was rising like a wave I couldn't fight. Dad kept saying, "Hang on, sweetheart. We'll be there soon." But he wasn't speeding. He wasn't even breaking the speed limit. He stopped obediently at every red light, every stop sign, as if we were just running errands. I wanted to yell at him, "Drive faster. Don't you see what's happening to me?" But the pain made it impossible to speak. Rachel, meanwhile, was texting her book club. "I might be a few minutes late," she said lightly, "but we'll still meet." She told Dad I'd be fine, that urgent care could handle it. "We'll be back before dessert," she added with a small laugh. When we finally pulled into the strip mall parking lot, I saw it, the urgent care sign glowing weakly beside a dry cleaner and a pizza shop. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a hospital. It was a storefront. Dad parked the car, and they came around to help me out. The moment they tried to lift me, white-hot agony surged up my spine and I vomited all over the pavement. Rachel jumped back with a disgusted gasp, clutching her purse to her chest so nothing splattered her shoes. Dad tried to hold me upright, but my legs wouldn't work. They kept folding under me, trembling uselessly. Half dragging me, he got me through the glass doors while Rachel hurried ahead, still looking more annoyed than worried. The people in the waiting room went silent when they saw us. The receptionist's eyes widened as Dad stammered, She fell off a ladder. Hurt her back. She can't move her legs right." The receptionist stood immediately. "Sir, this sounds like a spinal injury. You need an emergency department, not urgent care. You should have called 112. Dad and Rachel exchanged a look, an awkward, guilty pause that said everything. Rachel tried to argue. "Couldn't you at least do an x-ray? Just to check how bad it is?" The receptionist shook her head. "Even if we did, we can't treat that kind of injury here. We'd have to call an ambulance either way." A nurse appeared from the back, her eyes scanning me with alarm. "How long ago did she fall?" "About 15 minutes, Dad said quietly. The nurse's face changed instantly. Her voice turned sharp, professional. "You moved her? Without support?" She looked at Rachel. "Why didn't you call an ambulance?" Rachel started to explain, something about cost, about time, about not wanting to ruin her evening, but the nurse cut her off. 15 minutes is already far too long. Moving her could have caused permanent spinal damage. Dad went pale. Rachel looked away. And that's when the reality finally hit me, my body wasn't the only thing broken that day. Something in my family had shattered, too. The nurse didn't waste a second. Her calm professionalism snapped into urgency. "Call 112. Now," she ordered. "Don't move her. She needs to stay flat." Dad finally pulled out his phone, fumbling as he dialed. Meanwhile, the nurse gently guided me down onto the waiting room floor, her hand steady but firm. "You're doing great," she murmured. "Just lie still." She started asking questions, where the pain was, what I could feel, what I couldn't. When I told her the numbness had climbed into my torso, her expression shifted instantly from concern to alarm. She told the people in the waiting room to clear space, her voice sharp but controlled, and someone fetched blankets to cushion my head. Rachel stood off to the side, arms crossed, face tight with irritation. She checked her watch again and muttered to Dad, "Well, I'll have to cancel my book club after all this." Her tone made it sound like an inconvenience, not a crisis. About 6 minutes later, the paramedics arrived, a blur of navy uniforms, gloved hands, and calm authority. One knelt beside me and began firing questions: how far I'd fallen, how long ago, what I was feeling. When I explained the tingling and the weakness in my legs, both of them exchanged quick, grim looks. "Why wasn't 112 called right away?" one of them asked sharply. Dad tried to explain, something about thinking urgent care was faster, about Rachel's suggestion, but the paramedic cut him off. "Sir, with spinal symptoms like these, any delay or movement could have catastrophic consequences." That word, catastrophic, hung in the air. They worked quickly, sliding a neck brace under my chin, immobilizing my head. Every touch sent pain shooting through me, but they moved with the precision of people who knew exactly what was at stake. I cried out as they shifted me onto the backboard, apologizing through the tears, and one of the paramedics leaned close and said softly, "You're doing fine. We've got you. You're safe now." They secured the straps across my shoulders, hips, and legs, then lifted me onto the stretcher. The lights from the ceiling blurred as they wheeled me out. I caught a glimpse of Rachel standing by the glass doors, still holding her phone, her face unreadable. Inside the ambulance, one paramedic climbed in with me while the other jumped into the driver's seat. The siren wailed as we pulled away from the strip mall, blue lights flashing across the walls. The medic beside me began running tests, tapping my knees, pressing on my feet, asking me to wiggle my toes. When I tried to move the ones on my right foot, nothing happened. He noted something on his tablet, his expression tightening for just a moment before he masked it behind a professional calm. He started in 4, adjusted monitors, and told me we were heading to the Regional Trauma Center, the best neurosurgery hospital in the area. The word neurosurgery sent a cold wave through my stomach. "Does that mean I'll need spinal surgery?" I whispered. He hesitated just long enough for me to know the truth. "We won't know until they do imaging," he said gently. "But given your symptoms, it's possible." The siren screamed above us, but inside, everything felt too still. Each turn of the ambulance made me aware of how tightly I was strapped down, how powerless I was inside my own body. To keep me awake, he kept talking, asking questions. So I told him what had happened, the ladder, the fall, and how it took 15 minutes for anyone to call for help. He didn't say a word. But I saw the muscle in his jaw clench hard, and in that silence, I understood everything he didn't have to say. The hospital swallowed me in a blur of white light and noise. The moment the ambulance doors swung open, I was rushed through automatic doors into a trauma bay that looked like something out of a movie, bright overhead lamps, the sharp scent of antiseptic, and people in blue scrubs moving with frightening speed. Voices surrounded me, clipped and clinical, speaking in a language of medical urgency I didn't understand. Hands were everywhere, cutting away my shirt, sticking cold electrodes to my chest, adjusting 4 lines. Someone pressed against my spine while another called out numbers. I was just there, on a table under the lights, my body no longer mine. A woman leaned over me, her eyes steady behind her mask. "I'm Dr. Williams," she said gently. "We're going to do a CT scan of your spine to see exactly what's injured, okay?" She asked me the same questions I'd already answered a dozen times, what I could feel, what I couldn't. When she tapped a small metal hammer against my feet, my left reflex twitched weakly, but the right did nothing. Her face didn't change, but she shared a brief, quiet glance with one of the nurses that made my stomach twist. They wheeled me down a hallway to a cold, humming room where a massive machine waited. The technician's voice was calm, almost distant. "Lie perfectly still," he said. "You'll hear loud noises. Don't move." The scan lasted 8 minutes, 8 eternal, suffocating minutes. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to imagine the images appearing on their monitors, the fractured bones, the swollen nerves, the damage I couldn't yet feel. When it was over, they took me to the neuro ICU, a sterile room filled with blinking monitors and the rhythmic beeping of machines. A nurse adjusted my fore and told me to rest. I tried to close my eyes, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. About 25 minutes later, I heard raised voices in the hallway. My father and Rachel. Her tone was sharp, exasperated. "You don't understand, Mark. I planned this night for weeks," and his, low and shaking, "Rachel, our daughter might never walk again. Who cares about your damn book club?" When they entered, Rachel hovered near the doorway, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes fixed anywhere but me. Dad approached slowly, his face pale, guilt written across every line. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I should have called 112 right away." I just stared at him. There were no words. An apology couldn't undo what his hesitation might have cost me. A few moments later, Dr. Williams came in, holding a tablet. Her tone was calm, professional, but I saw the heaviness behind her eyes. "The CT scan shows multiple fractures in your lower spine," she said. "There's also significant swelling, edema, pressing on your spinal cord. That's what's causing the weakness and numbness." The words landed like blows. "You'll need surgery within the next few hours," she continued, "to stabilize the fracture and relieve the pressure. The delay before treatment has unfortunately worsened the swelling." I saw the blood drain from Dad's face. "The delay, does that mean permanent damage?" he asked hoarsely. Dr. Williams hesitated, then said, "It's too soon to know. But every minute the spinal cord stays compressed increases the risk of lasting nerve injury." No one spoke after that. The machines beeped softly. Rachel shifted by the door, already looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. And lying there, staring at the ceiling, I realized that my life had changed forever, because of one fall, and two people who couldn't decide fast enough to care. I tried. God, I tried so hard. But no matter how much I focused, how much I willed my legs to move, they just didn't. My right foot twitched slightly, just a flicker, like a dying spark, but my left leg stayed heavy, motionless, foreign. I couldn't even feel the blanket against my skin. Dr. Gates wrote something on his clipboard, his tone calm, measured, too calm. "That's okay," he said softly. "It's still very early. We'll keep monitoring the inflammation and continue with steroids to reduce the swelling." But the way he avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. When he left, I stared at the ceiling tiles, each one blurring into the next until they became a single white void. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound that anchored me. I felt like I was sinking, not falling, just drifting downward into something I couldn't escape. Dad came in not long after, looking like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, and there was this hollow look in his eyes I'd never seen before. He sat down beside me, his voice breaking when he said, "The doctor said the surgery went well. You're going to heal. You're strong, sweetheart." But I could hear the fear behind the words, that desperate kind of hope people cling to when they're trying to convince themselves. Rachel was with him, of course. Still dressed perfectly, still detached. She offered a thin smile and a quiet, "You're lucky to be alive." Lucky. That word hit me harder than anything else. Lucky to what? To wake up in a body that no longer listened to me? To have my life split in two, before the fall and after? That night, as the nurses dimmed the lights and the world grew quiet, I stared at my legs under the blanket. They looked normal, they looked like mine, but they might as well have belonged to someone else. And for the first time since the accident, I let myself cry. Not from pain, but from the terrifying realization that I might never stand again. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the field, the last game I played, the grass under my cleats, the feeling of sprinting, of control, of strength. I could almost feel the wind on my face, until I remembered I couldn't even stand anymore. The contrast was unbearable. In the quiet of that hospital room, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, I felt like my life had been divided cleanly in two, before and after. Before was sunlight, laughter, running until my lungs burned. After was antiseptic air, white walls, and the heavy weight of my own legs that refused to obey. On the 5th morning, the nurse helped me transfer from the bed to a wheelchair. It was supposed to be progress, but the humiliation stung worse than the pain. Every movement was awkward, clumsy, unnatural. I felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally, like everyone could see how broken I was. When Dad came in later that day, he tried again to talk, telling me about Lily, about how she drew me a picture of the two of us walking by the lake for when you're better. He smiled through it, but I could see the guilt etched deep into his face. I wanted to forgive him, part of me even knew I would, someday, but right then, I couldn't. It was too raw. Too soon. That evening, Dr. Gates returned with the latest test results. He explained that the swelling around my spinal cord was finally starting to go down, a good sign, but that I'd need to stay under observation for at least another week. Your right side is still weak, he said, but your body is trying to reconnect those signals. That's promising. Promising. Another word that felt too fragile to trust. Later, when the nurses dimmed the lights, I sat in the wheelchair by the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered faintly through the glass. Cars moved, people walked, the world kept going, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I rested my hand on my leg, my stubborn, silent right leg, and whispered, "Come on. Please." I tried again to move it. Just a flicker, a tremor, something. And this time, I thought, or maybe imagined, that I felt the faintest twitch. So small it might have been nothing. But I held on to it anyway. Because when your whole life has been broken apart, sometimes even a single, almost imagined twitch can feel like hope. Dr. Gates's words should have comforted me, good indication, best chance, but they felt hollow, like echoes in a tunnel. I nodded, pretending to take strength from them, but all I could think about was that word, bruise. A bruise fades, doesn't it? But what if this one didn't? What if it stayed, inside me, invisible but permanent, a reminder of that single, stupid decision made in a moment of selfishness? When Dr. Gates left, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, counting the faint hums of the machines around me. Each one felt like the ticking of a clock I could never rewind. By the afternoon, the therapist came again to work with me. She helped me shift from the bed to a chair, guided my hands to the rails, and told me to push, gently, slowly. The pain was sharp but distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Good," she said softly, "that's it. You're getting stronger every day." I didn't feel stronger. I felt exhausted. Hollow. But when I looked down, I realized my right leg had moved, barely, a tremor, but this time real. The therapist smiled when she saw it. "See? That's your body waking up." For a moment, hope flickered again, small, fragile, but alive. That evening, a nurse brought me a note. It was from Lily, written in big, uneven letters, "I love you. Get better soon. I told Daddy to be nice to you." I smiled through tears I didn't mean to cry. Even in all this chaos, my little sister still saw things clearly. Later that night, I overheard two nurses talking quietly near the doorway. They mentioned child services and mandatory report. My pulse quickened. I realized that the investigation wasn't just words on paper anymore, it was real. Someone, somewhere, was deciding whether what Dad and Rachel had done was negligence. And for the first time, I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted justice, yes, but I also wanted my dad. I wanted my family back, the one that existed before the fall, before the guilt and the fear and the silence. As the lights dimmed, I stared out at the city again. My body was weak, my future uncertain, and my family fractured, but inside, something had shifted. I wasn't just waiting to be healed anymore. I was fighting for it. Mom didn't waste any time. Once the lawyer left, she sat by my bed and held my hand, firm, protective, like she was anchoring me to something solid after everything had spun out of control. For the first time since the accident, I felt like someone was really on my side. That evening, Dad came by again. His eyes were swollen, his shirt wrinkled like he hadn't slept. Mom was still in the room when he arrived, and the air immediately turned sharp. "Why are you here, Mark?" she asked flatly. He looked at me before answering. "To see my daughter." Mom's voice didn't rise, but it cut like glass. "You've done enough." He tried to explain again, how he panicked, how Rachel convinced him it wasn't serious, but the words just floated in the sterile hospital air, empty and fragile. I watched the two of them, my parents, standing on opposite sides of my bed, the gulf between them wider than ever. For a second, I wished I could disappear. Dad eventually left without saying much else. When the door closed, Mom sat back down and sighed, her eyes red. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this," she whispered. "But I promise you, I'm going to make sure no one ever puts you in danger again." Over the next few days, things started moving quickly. CPS investigators visited, asking quiet but pointed questions. They wanted to confirm every detail: who made the decisions, how long the delay was, who said what. I answered truthfully, even though each question felt like reopening a wound. The hospital staff were careful, professional, but I could tell they were watching too. The nurses, the social worker, even Dr. Gates seemed gentler around me, like they all knew what was happening behind the scenes. Rachel didn't visit again. Not once. When Lily came back, Mom met her in the hallway and brought her in carefully. She told me later that Dad had agreed Lily would stay with her for now. My sister climbed up on the bed and hugged me, her tiny arms wrapping around my waist. "Mom says you're going to come live with us for a while," she said, smiling. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah, kiddo. Just for a bit." That night, after everyone had gone, I lay there in the half-dark, feeling both lighter and lonelier than I'd ever felt. I wasn't sure what would happen next, if Dad would be charged, if Rachel would ever face consequences, or if I'd ever walk normally again. But one thing had changed. I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a witness to what neglect really looked like when it wore the face of someone you loved. That first night in the apartment, the silence felt almost sacred. No hospital alarms, no nurses coming in at all hours, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car outside. Mom sat on the edge of my bed, adjusting the blanket around my legs like she used to when I was little. "You're safe here," she said quietly. "We'll take this one day at a time." And for the first time since the fall, I actually believed her. The next morning, she made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and helped me sit at the small kitchen table. Even that short transfer from bed to chair was a production, steadying the walker, checking the brakes on the wheelchair, adjusting my balance so I wouldn't tip. Every move reminded me how fragile my body still was. Physical therapy started again 2 days later at a rehab center downtown. Nina had arranged the transfer and introduced me to a new therapist named Omar, who specialized in post-spinal injury recovery. Omar was calm and steady, the kind of person who could make you believe progress was inevitable, even when you were trembling just from standing. "Don't chase perfection," he said during our first session. "Chase effort. That's what brings the nerves back online." We practiced controlled transfers from the chair to a padded bench, then leg lifts, then partial stands. Each session was exhausting, but I could feel flickers of strength returning, tiny sparks that might one day become something like normal. Meanwhile, the legal and family situation around me was shifting like an aftershock that wouldn't settle. Mom's lawyer, Laura, kept her updated daily. CPS had finished their interviews, and Gerald had visited Lily's school to speak with her teachers. He told Mom privately that Lily had expressed being scared of Rachel when she got angry, which sent a chill through both of us. A week after my discharge, Gerald came by the apartment to tell us that CPS had recommended a temporary suspension of Dad's custodial rights pending a family court hearing. Lily would remain with Mom until further notice. I could see relief and grief mingling on Mom's face, relief that Lily was safe, grief that it had come to this. Dad called that night. His voice cracked over the phone, apologizing again, saying he'd been contacted by both CPS and the police. "They're investigating Rachel for neglect," he said, almost in disbelief. "They think he trailed off." I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I told him, they should. There was silence on the line, then the sound of him crying softly. After I hung up, I sat there staring at my motionless right leg, thinking about how quickly a single decision could change the entire landscape of a life, how one person's impatience could echo through someone else's bones. The next morning, Mom found me awake early, doing my leg stretches before therapy. She smiled and said, "You're fighting back already." Maybe I was. Or maybe I just couldn't stand the idea that Rachel and Dad's negligence would be the final word on my story. The contrast between Mom and Dad couldn't have been sharper. In just a few days, she had transformed the apartment into a haven suited for my recovery, anticipating every need and arranging everything with precision. That first night, attempting to shower with her help became an emotional gauntlet. I wept, overcome by pain, frustration, and the humiliation of needing assistance for something so basic. Mom simply held me, letting me cry, whispering that it was okay to feel terrified, angry, or helpless. Her steady presence made the fear manageable. Exhausted beyond measure, I fell into bed and surrendered to sleep almost instantly. The next morning, physical therapy began at a small outpatient clinic 15 minutes away. Mom managed every transfer, from wheelchair to car to clinic wheelchair, like a seasoned nurse. Russell, my new physical therapist, was clearly experienced with spinal cord injuries. He ran meticulous assessments, checking strength, reflexes, and range of motion. My right leg remained stubbornly weak, almost non-responsive in parts, while my left showed around 60% function. He mapped out a plan of progressive exercises, designed to retrain my nervous system and rebuild strength. Resistance bands, balancing drills, and supported walking between parallel bars pushed me to my limits. After the first hour, I was drenched, exhausted, and nearly in tears, but Russell commended my effort, stressing that repetition and consistency would be the key to regaining function. Skipping sessions would slow or even jeopardize my recovery. Back at the apartment, I collapsed into bed and slept for 2 hours, utterly drained. Dad's calls and messages started again, pleading, apologetic, persistent, but I ignored most of them. Mom coordinated with her lawyer, ensuring that communication stayed appropriate while managing custody discussions and the mounting medical bills. By then, the hospital expenses alone had surpassed $150,000, not counting ongoing rehab costs. Laura Evans, our family lawyer, was aggressively arguing that Dad and Rachel should bear financial responsibility for the fallout caused by their reckless decisions. 2 weeks later, CPS concluded that Dad had acted irresponsibly, endangering my health. He was required to attend parenting seminars, submit to monthly home visits if he wished to retain custody of Lily, and our case was placed on ongoing monitoring. Gerald Finch called to inform me, while criminal charges weren't being pursued, the findings could influence both custody proceedings and civil litigation. For the first time, it felt like someone official had acknowledged Dad's failures, even if it couldn't undo the damage to my spine. My 15th birthday arrived quietly. Mom made a tiny cake, Lily gifted me a homemade card. Dad drove Lily over, attempting to come inside, but Mom firmly barred him. Lily clung to me, whispering that she missed me and wished I could come home, tears streaking her small face. I had to tell her I couldn't, and watched her cry as Dad collected her, angry and confused. My heart ached, even though none of this was my fault. After they left, Mom and I sat together, quietly planning the months ahead. She told me she was considering permanently transferring her work to this city so that we could stay together during my recovery, a thought that finally brought a flicker of comfort amidst the long, painful road ahead. The thought of starting a new school in a wheelchair made my chest tighten with fear. But returning to Dad's house was not an option, so this daunting prospect felt like the lesser of two evils. Physical therapy was slow and excruciatingly frustrating. After 4 weeks, I could manage short walks with a walker, but my right leg dragged, and persistent lower back pain gnawed at me with every step. Russell assured me this was significant progress given the severity of my injuries, yet each small stride felt like a monumental struggle. The imbalance in my legs improved gradually, though Russell warned that my right side would likely never match my left entirely. He also cautioned that I would probably experience back pain for the rest of my life, and that I'd need to exercise constant caution. The realization that this injury would permanently alter my life, that simple movements would never again feel ordinary, hit me unexpectedly and made me want to scream. To process the trauma, anger, and grief, I began seeing Dr. Kim, a therapist who helped me understand that all the emotions I was feeling, fear, rage, sadness, were not only normal but entirely justified. 2 months after the accident, Laura Evans filed a civil lawsuit against Dad and Rachel, alleging negligence and child endangerment. The complaint sought reimbursement for medical expenses, future care, pain and suffering, and potential long-term impairment. Dad's attorney attempted to argue that he had acted in good faith, but Laura had detailed documentation from the urgent care staff, paramedics, and Dr. Gates demonstrating that the delay in treatment had likely worsened my outcome. Rachel hired her own lawyer and tried to claim she had merely deferred to Dad as the parent, but Laura countered with my explicit account of Rachel persuading him to postpone calling 112. The legal process was tedious and emotionally draining, depositions, document requests, and constant back and forth between attorneys, but physical therapy continued 3 times a week, slowly restoring function. Russell warned that my progress might plateau before I fully recovered, and every session felt like both a victory and a reminder of how far I had to go. I turned 16 during a therapy session, lifting my legs with resistance bands while Mom waited patiently nearby. Russell surprised me with a cupcake and a tiny candle, singing happy birthday, and I sobbed, not from joy, but from the stark contrast between this reality and the life I had envisioned. I had imagined varsity soccer, learning to drive, and planning for college. Instead, I was relearning to walk, coping with chronic pain, and suing my own father. After 6 long months, the lawsuit concluded out of court. Dad's insurance company agreed to cover the bulk of my medical expenses, as well as additional compensation for my injuries. Rachel's insurance also contributed, though her attorney negotiated a smaller sum. The settlement brought relief and validation, but the journey of recovery, and the echoes of that day, remained etched in my body and mind. The settlement didn't fix my spine. It didn't take away the pain that greeted me every morning, or the fatigue that came with each step I took. What it did give me was freedom, from the crushing fear of lifelong medical debt. Laura told me the payout was substantial, a reflection of just how serious Dad and Rachel's negligence had been. The insurance companies, she explained, had decided that settling was safer than facing a jury who would hear the full story and see exactly what their good faith judgment had cost me. Physical therapy was eventually reduced to twice a week. As Russell had predicted, I reached a plateau. I could walk unaided, but there was still a visible limp, reduced feeling in my right foot, and a constant ache in my lower back that required daily medication. Russell reminded me that I had achieved remarkable progress considering the extent of my spinal injury and the delay in treatment, but the truth was I would never be fully normal again. Soccer, running, those parts of my life were gone. Even light jogging risked further damage. Russell helped me find new activities, swimming, adaptive cycling, ways to stay active without pushing my spine beyond its limits. But they never filled the same space. The joy I once found in movement was now accompanied by caution, by the dull awareness of fragility. Dr. Kim helped me face that loss, the grief of a life I'd never get back. Through months of therapy, I began to accept this new version of myself, not broken, just changed. Mom made her move permanent, and we finally found a proper apartment, small, bright, and close to everything I needed. I started at the local high school for my junior year, entering as the new girl with a limp. Dad and I eventually began having supervised sessions with Dr. Kim, working towards some kind of reconciliation. He had completed the CPS parenting classes and appeared genuinely remorseful. But trust isn't something that can be ordered by a court or earned in a few tearful apologies. He had chosen Rachel's social life over my safety, and that choice had marked me forever. I wasn't sure forgiveness was even the right word for what I felt. It was more like a quiet, tired acceptance. Lily came to stay with Mom and me on weekends. We rebuilt our bond slowly, with laughter, shared shows, and whispered talks before bed. She asked why I walked differently now, why I couldn't play soccer anymore. I tried to answer gently, telling her the truth in pieces she could understand. 6 months after the accident, Dad and Rachel divorced. He claimed she had clouded his judgment, that she was toxic for both him and our family. I didn't know if that was true or just convenient, but either way, Lily wouldn't be living with her anymore. That, at least, felt like a small piece of justice. A year later, despite missed days for medical appointments and therapy, I graduated high school with honors. My limp was still noticeable, and standing for long periods left my back throbbing, so I sat through part of the ceremony. When my name was called, I rose and crossed the stage slowly, each step a victory. Mom cried openly, remembering the day she wasn't sure I'd ever walk again. Dad was there too, sitting several rows back. When our eyes met, he gave a small, sad smile and a hesitant wave. I lifted my hand in return, acknowledging, but not forgiving. Because some things, no matter how well-intentioned or regretful the aftermath, cannot be undone. That day, I understood something I hadn't before: the people who are supposed to protect you can fail in ways that reshape your life forever. And when they do, all you can do is gather the fragments, rebuild what's left, and keep living, even if every step reminds you of what was lost. Years later, I found myself standing at the edge of a quiet lake, the sun glinting off the water in gold and silver. My legs were strong, but I felt the lingering pull of memory in every step. The limp remained, a subtle but persistent reminder of the day that had changed everything. Some mornings, my back ached fiercely, and some evenings, I still felt the shadow of fear that had once paralyzed me entirely. But life had also taught me resilience. I had returned to sports, not the varsity soccer of my dreams, but swimming, cycling, and adapted activities that let me move freely and joyfully without fear. Pain and limitation had become part of my rhythm, and I had learned to move through them with patience rather than anger. Mom had stayed close, a constant anchor. Lily and I were closer than ever, our bond strengthened by the upheaval and the shared understanding of what it meant to rely on one another. Dad was a presence on the periphery now, no longer the one whose decisions carried the weight of my survival, but someone I could observe with caution and measured expectation. I often thought about that afternoon, the fall, the delay, Rachel's indifference, and Dad's weakness. It hurt to recall, but the pain no longer consumed me. Instead, it had shaped me, honed my sense of boundaries, of trust, and of the people who truly mattered. I had survived not just the accident, but the choices that endangered me. Looking out across the lake, I realized that life had given me a second chance, one I could mold into strength, gratitude, and clarity. I had learned that those who are meant to protect you can fail, but your own resilience can rise higher than the worst errors of others. And in that quiet understanding, I finally felt a measure of peace.